Okay, this lecture is about commerce and culture, so basically we're going to be focusing on trade routes. Now, the weird thing about this one is that these trade routes will develop during the classical era and they'll continue into the post-classical era and beyond. So they don't really fit into one specific unit of time. So we're kind of talking about them at the end of the classical era before we get to the post-classical era in full. So just know that they start in the classical era and then kind of continue on. So our first question, what motivated and sustained the long-distance commerce of the Silk Roads, the sea roads, that would be the Indian Ocean trade, and the sand roads, the trans-Saharan trade in Africa? So what motivated? Why are people trading in these regions? There's two main reasons. One is they have a desire for luxury items, especially ones that they can't access in their own civilizations. So for an example, silk in China. The Chinese kept the way that they made silk a secret for hundreds of years because they didn't want anyone else to know how to make it. And so that basically guaranteed that people were going to be coming to China to trade because they couldn't make silk on their own, so they had to go to China in order to get it. Another reason why they would be trading is an accumulation of wealth. So merchants and empires, government systems recognize that through trade you can increase the amount of wealth that you have, because if you have a hard to find luxury item, you can bring it back to your civilization and sell it for a lot of money and increase your wealth. Now, over time, what sustained the trade network? So once they got going, why did they continue? For the most part, they were supported from the governments, the empires, because the governments were getting more wealthy through trade. You also are going to see once religion starts spreading, you have merchants and in some cases whole societies that are now united through religion. So once Buddhism, for example, spreads from India into China, you have people in India and in China who are now Buddhist. So they're kind of united through religious ties. So that's going to kind of guarantee that they're going to stay in contact with each other. And then things like the development of technology, examples here are ships and compasses. Once people realize that there is technology in other places, they're going to continue trading with those people until they at the very least can figure out how to make the technology on their own. And if they can't figure out how to make it on their own, they have to keep trading in order to maintain access to the technology. All right, number two, why did the Eastern Hemisphere, so we're talking about where the Americas is, I'm sorry, not where the Americas is, where Eurasia is, develop long-distance trade more extensively than the Western Hemisphere? So why do you see more trade in Europe, Asia, and Africa than you do in the Americas? Again, I feel like a broken record here. The Americas didn't have large animals to domesticate, except for llamas. Llamas are ornery. You cannot travel with them. And they spit a lot. So it doesn't make it very easy to use them as pack animals. So if you don't have a large animal that you can carry lots of goods on, it makes travel very, very difficult. Americas also lacked large oceanic vessels, so that means ships. Okay, the shipbuilding technology was developed in Northern Europe and China and then diffused throughout all of Eurasia and into Africa through trade. The Americas didn't have contact with those areas, so they didn't know about the technology. Now, they do have instances where we found things like canoes and smaller boats, but those are not going to be to the scale where you could actually go out into the ocean safely on them. And then the geography of the Americas made long-distance trade really difficult. Okay, so if you think about the way the Americas looks, they're connected by a very, very narrow strip in Panama. It makes travel through that area very difficult because it's so narrow. So it would be something called a bottleneck where people would kind of get backed up in Panama because it's so narrow. If you have people trying to travel through that area in both directions, it's going to slow them down. And since the Americas is oriented north-south, that means that if you're going to be diffusing crops or people, they're going to have to be able to adapt to different kinds of climates. So here, if you look at our map, the climate and the temperatures up here in North America would be very different than here in Latin America, very different in Northern South America. So if I was somebody who is going to be a trader, not only would I have to bring supplies to adapt to the changing climates, because as I'm going south, it's going to get warmer, and then if I continue to go south, it's going to get much cooler. I would also have to be bringing crops that could survive in those areas. So crops that can be successfully grown in this climate and these temperatures would not necessarily be successfully grown here. So it wasn't really to their benefit to trade because their climates between the different civilizations were so different. And then here, for those of you who have never seen a llama before, this is what our furry friend looks like. They're not going to be the most useful animals for domestication. Okay, our third question, in what ways did commercial exchange foster change in civilization? So how did trade all over bring change in all of our civilizations? So first, it provides resources and incentives to build larger, more powerful states. States is just another word for governments. So if my government has access to more money, then they're going to be able to expand. If my government knows that a nearby neighbor has a very valuable crop that we don't have, it provides them incentive to take over that region, so they don't have to worry about paying them to trade with them anymore. They would just be a part of the empire. So it provides them a reason to want to expand. Trade also allows for cultural diffusion, so we talked about this a little bit. Religions would get exchanged across these trade routes. Plants, animals, crops, technology, all of those things would be exchanged along trade routes. It's also going to make the spread of disease much easier because people will bring sickness either with them or with the animals that are coming with them on the trade routes. Trade's also going to encourage job specialization and discourage self-sufficiency. So what this means is that empires figure out that if I'm bad at growing, let's say, if I'm bad at growing wheat because the geography of where I live doesn't really support growing wheat, it's cheaper for me to trade with someone else, trade a product that I can make easily with someone else and get wheat from them than to try and grow wheat on my own. So rather than every single empire trying to grow all the products and all the crops that they need by themselves, they figure out it's cheaper just to specialize in making 1 to maybe 3 things and trading with other civilizations for the other crops or resources that they need. And then occasionally you're going to see that trade was a way of moving up the social ladder, so it provided social mobility. It's not going to be in every civilization, so as you already know, China, they didn't really view merchants very highly. But there were some empires where traders could improve their status because they were becoming so wealthy. It was a very lucrative job that they could move up the social ladder. So here I've got a map where you can see the spread of Islam and of Buddhism. Notice it's mostly in trading areas. So up here, this kind of mirrors the Silk Roads. Down here, you've got it expanding across the Indian Ocean. This would have been where Indian Ocean trade is going on. And then here I've got a map of the spread of the bubonic plague. Again, you can see it's spreading across the Silk Roads. Okay, so the religions and the diseases are spreading basically following the same pattern, and that's because it was spread through trade. All right, that is all we have for commerce and culture. If you have any questions, write them down, bring them up to class, and we will discuss.